Welcome back to Clarkston Lighthouse Guidance. I'm Chandler Fleming, host of our show today, and this is my wife, Victoria.
Hello, Chandler. So today our topic is screen time.
Screen time.
Yes, it is, and it's a hot topic.
Everybody's talking about this.
It seems like a lot of research is being done. It is a hot topic, and as we approach the subject today, we just want to define a little bit what screen time is. It's pretty obvious. It's all those electronics, but it breaks down into...
Well, electronics. Anything that has a screen. Computer, television, tablet, phone, video games.
iPads, any of those, Kindle, e-readers, all of those things that we're looking at that have screens on them. And it was interesting as I was looking online to kind of look at, gosh, what are the pros and cons of our electronic time? Okay. Yeah, what are the pros and cons of our electronic time? I came across this funny list that was put out by The Onion online. They do some satire. And I think as we look at this list, it pretty much captures the fears that we have, particularly the parents may have, that, you know, the kids are going to end up obese and sedentary, that they're never going to get involved in any type of hobbies, that we're using it as a babysitter, that Marissa Hargitay from Special Victims Unit is going to be taking care of them. And, you know, the list goes on and on. Yeah. What are some things you hear?
Well, I think a lot of things. It's not only just the amount of time and what they're not doing instead, it's what they're looking at. You know, a lot of screen time is highly sexualized or with a lot of violence. You know, a long time ago when video games started coming out, the Call of Duty stuff, I knew a lot of parents who said, yeah, it's rated M, that's mature, I'm not gonna let my kids watch it. And as time has gone by, more and more parents are kind of, you know, dropping their guard and really have accepted the fact that their kids are going to be little assassins for 3 hours every day. So, you know, and then there's the pornographic, sexualized side of screen times, and even on television, and but you know, the internet especially.
So I think that's a very reasonable point then, that there's concern, and notice that in this satirical list that those were the pros.
Sure.
You know, I didn't even get into what they considered the cons. And the research is showing that there is some bad, but first let's look at the fact, let's add some balance. It's not all bad.
No, not at all.
Can you think of what some of the positives might be?
You know, I have a lot of my clients and just people I know of that are going south for Florida. They're going on vacation for spring break, and the great babysitter distractor in that car ride down is going to be a lot of different screens. They're going to be watching movies, they're going to be watching video clips. Some of them, you know, a nice enough car, they got their Xbox all hooked up, and on their way down, they're going to be playing these video games. Yeah,
what I wouldn't have given to have had just even the first DVD players, portable ones, when I was driving from Massachusetts to Tennessee. Back then, speed limit was 50 miles an hour. In Pennsylvania, if you went a mile over, you got a ticket.
55.
Was it 55? Okay, 55, and it was a long drive, 16 hours.
Sure was.
So yeah, screen time would have been an awesome thing to have. You know, through our screens, we have amazing access to information, incredible access to information. I mean, I remember when I would write a research paper, it would be go to the library and have a table heaped with all the encyclopedias, all the books that had information about it. So it's like very rapid access to information. There is an opportunity to interact.
Yeah, you know, I know a lot of kids who, you know, because of their fear or anxiety or whatever, probably wouldn't talk face to face with somebody else, but with the anonymity and not having to be real present, they do develop some social skills. They talk to other people and interact with them, and it kind of gives them some confidence. It gives them a sense of, hey, I do have people that enjoy talking to me.
That's a good point.
So it can be, you know, and with a lot of kids that I deal with who do have anxiety, that's kind of the first step. Can you know, talk to somebody on Xbox? And a lot of them are able to do that, and then you can kind of generalize and grow from that.
Right, and there's some hand-eye coordination that's developed. Sure. You know, there's global access like never before. Never before. You know, in the past, people would have to wait weeks and months for a letter, and now we can Skype and have that immediate access.
Right.
You know, so as we go into this and we're looking more at the risk, we do want to keep in mind that there are some definite positives.
Oh, for sure.
You know, but one of the risks as we go into it is screen time and sleep. And there's some very interesting information out there about screen time and sleep. And even recently on Fox and CNN, there was a person being interviewed about some research research and how people are obsessively checking their email, and therefore their work is impeding even their home life.
Right.
And as we obsessively check our email and as we obsessively get on the computer, cortisol, the stress, increases the release of cortisol. And then cortisol, gosh, if you do that right before bed, and now I've got all this stress built up and all this cortisol in my system that's needing to be worked through, that's not going to help.
No.
That's not at all going to help. And then the other part that they're very definitely showing is the fact that the screens themselves are decreasing our melatonin. And melatonin is a very important hormone for sleep. And so if we have cortisol, an increase in our stress hormone, if we have a decrease in melatonin, which the body naturally releases, but all these lights and screens are causing the body to think, no, it's not time to release the melatonin, then it's a recipe for really disaster when it comes to sleep, you know. And then another aspect that comes into it is dopamine.
Yep.
And what could you tell us about dopamine?
Well, you know, dopamine's the excitement hormone. So a long time ago, we used to tell people, you know, don't exercise 2 or 3 hours before bed because the dopamine and the adrenaline that they're pumping through their system is going to slow them down, or, you know, keep them ramped up actually during their time of sleep. So, you know, dopamine definitely kind of those happy hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, you blend those three things together. We've got the cortisol, the decrease in melatonin, the dopamine that's being released, and even through Candy Crush, there's an excitement in, whoa, I beat my level, or, you know, so we are looking at a potential recipe for disaster for the whole sleep area. So be very aware of that. If you're finding that, gosh, I'm just not sleeping well, recognize the impact of your screen time on sleep. It is has the risk of being detrimental. And then if you are not sleeping well, there's definitely an emotional impact to it. And what are we seeing, Chandler, in that emotional impact?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, sleep is very important to maintain just a mood. People tend to be much more irritable and depressed and anxious if they don't sleep. A good night's sleep is really, really important. And then there's always that problem of once our sleep pattern gets broken, you know, it's much, much more difficult to maintain. I also feel like in the show, oftentimes we're talking to parents and we're talking to people that are responsible. Although adults and parents do have screen time issues, I think a lot of times the big concern is for their kids. And, you know, you need to kind of take a look at that. If your kid is not sleeping well, oftentimes it's the stimulation of the screen time, but also that anticipation part of it, where, you know, they don't want to turn their phone off because what if somebody texts them at 1 o'clock in the morning and it's really important, or 3 o'clock in the morning and it's really important.
Absolutely.
So it's that anticipation part of it too that goes along with that screen time.
So I appreciate both, though. It is definitely for our teenagers and for our kids, but also for us as adults. We're bringing our work home now.
Yes.
You know, and if we're anticipating an email, if we're anticipating a text, then when are we ever just having downtime and taking time just to be with our family? And so I know, for example, even the show that I'd seen with the interview, they were saying limit the number of times we check our email, and really the ideal was no more than 3 times a day. You know, first thing in the morning, maybe mid-afternoon, and then right before you leave work. But right before bed is not a good time, because it does, if there's something that now's on your mind and now your mind is thinking, I've got to respond to this, and oh no, what am I going to do about this? Or even excited, wow, I get to, then again, we're releasing either the dopamine or the cortisol, and it's going to negatively affect.
Yeah. And I think people need to be proactive. As a counselor, I'm available 24 hours a day. And being proactive to me is letting my clients know that if you text me at 5 o'clock in the morning to let me know you're not going to be able to make your appointment at 8 that night, you're going to wake me up. It's planning ahead and letting people know, because there are some jobs, unfortunately, too many jobs that they want to be able to get a hold of you 24/7. So they give you a cell phone, and with that comes the responsibility of, when I call, you got to be there. So it's kind of letting people know and knowing how you're going to set those limits, talking to your boss possibly, hey, you know, this is something that I don't want to do. I don't want to be available 24/7. Let's put some limits on this.
Right.
And if you can't, you got to put those limits in place the best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that moderation factor, that
Yes.
setting boundaries. I remember when pagers came out. Gosh,
yeah.
how far we've come. You know, at least a pager, there was a sense of being able to ignore it for a time,
Yeah.
but now with such immediate access to information and immediate communication, a lot more is being demanded of people. Bosses are expecting more.
Yes.
For sure. So Chandler, as we're looking at this, so it's kind of looking like, gosh, there's a lot of risk involved with screen time. What do we do? Is it time just to be, oh, that's it, throw them all away?
Well, I think moderation's a big key of that, knowing what those limits are. For parents and people that are setting limits for somebody else, to be strategic in that and how they're setting those limits.
Yeah, so what would be some suggestions? I know as we've talked about this before, you've talked about a log and the
Right.
benefit of a log as opposed to just maybe saying no more than 2 hours a day or no more than 3 hours a day. You're talking about the benefit of a log.
Sure. So a lot of times with parents, I try to get them, especially during off school times, summer times and so forth, they say, you know, I'm afraid my kid is going to play video games all summer. That's all they're going to do. And so I'm only giving them 2 hours a day. And oftentimes that doesn't work out as well as saying, okay, you're giving them 2 hours a day. Why don't you from Sunday to Sunday give them 14 hours? And they keep a log. Anytime you come up to the log and you see them on a screen, then you make sure that they wrote it down in the log, and they lose 15 minutes if they don't. That allows them a couple different things. One is you're teaching them to moderate their own time.
Right.
So that if they use 14 hours their first day, they don't have any hours
They're
left.
out of time. Yep,
You know,
absolutely.
and sometimes more flexible. You know, I mean, it's a kind of a cold, rainy summer day. It may be a better day to play for 14 hours. It's a hot, sunny day. Might be a better day to not play at all. So it's giving them the responsibility of kind of budgeting out their time. Keeps you out of that role of, you know, when did it start, when did it not start, by having the log, and can be pretty effective.
Right, and the same is true for us. I think we need to be very mindful of how much time we're spending.
Yeah.
Because we as adults can be just as guilty of, I know for example, I guess there have been some daycares and kindergarten schools in general who have been putting signs up in the windows saying, put the screen away. Your child has things they want to say to you as you're picking them up from school today.
Yeah.
And I know there's been some controversy over that, but it is a little sad sometimes to see how there's a child maybe tugging at the sleeve of a parent, and the parent's so occupied with playing with that screen. And then it's interesting how those screen times are also affecting our brain. I know that there are some studies that were talking about that screens are very immediate, and there's a constancy, and there's a pushing at buttons, and they're now seeing little kids who are pushing at books, and the book isn't doing what the screen is able to do, and there's a certain frustration, but that it's affecting our reading. And so there also, as we're looking at some of those risks, we need to look at the reading, screens and reading, screens and comprehension, and some of those things as they've been looking at the impact of e-reading versus traditional reading. They're finding that perhaps it's not as beneficial, that people may not be retaining as much, that the comprehension in general, because as I was saying with the looking at a screen, we're constantly kind of poking at, a new thing flashes up, and so it's a very different method of looking at a screen, whereas reading is it's a learned behavior. And it's a word by word, linear, and so it's a very different brain function. And so there was actually one study where I believe it was in chemistry, but they had some chemistry students read out of a book and then also read from a screen. And they asked the college students themselves, which one do you think you learned more from? And what do you think the college students said?
Oh, probably the screen.
Oh, the screen for sure.
For
but then they tested them. And guess which test results came back better?
Oh, probably the written text.
Yeah, the traditional. And I'd almost forgotten this aspect of it, but yeah, it's absolutely, we do need to be recognizing that whole screen time and comprehension. And the other interesting part is people really enjoy the tactile experience of a traditional book more. You know, and so they are looking at, and so again, as we're looking at that moderation, some of our kids may want to argue, but I'm reading a book, I'm reading, there's still a benefit to just a good old-fashioned page-by-page book.
Right, and you know, a lot of times they're not reading the book, they're kind of looking at something on the screen, and things that are on screens, the important stuff tends to be bold or flash or different color, so that when you're given those kind of cues and you kind of train your brain, you can look at something and things jump out at you, and those are the important things. You go to a book, it's all black and white, it doesn't have that feature of saying, this is important, no, this is kind of filler. So people get in the habit of kind of looking, not to read the stuff, but looking in a way of, okay, what's the important things? Well, it's all in the same font. It's all in the same boldness. Maybe there's a little bit more boldness. So they get out of the habit of just being able to kind of screen through and be able to filter through all that content.
And that was exactly what they were finding, is that people, how we're digesting information now are the bolds.
Yep.
And so it's like kids and even adults are now reading a chapter heading and then making assumptions.
Yep.
And then they're scanning a written page looking for what will build the assumption, but then they go to actually take the test and they've missed the point.
Sure.
Because the chapter heading wasn't completely accurate.
Right.
And then we do need to be mindful of that. And it does make me sad to think about a kid punching at a magazine thinking it's going to do, funny, but a little bit sad,
How do I
because there
change
is
the page?
like,
Have you tried turning
how
it?
do I turn the page? And so, as we've said, there are definite benefits to electronic. There's ease to information. I can't even believe doing a research paper today. Totally
definitely,
different. You said your mom and dad bought you a set of encyclopedias. I
We
did not
had
have a set of encyclopedias.
Anybody want to buy a set of encyclopedias?
Really
Get 'em real
old
cheap.
information, so we do want to recognize absolutely the ability to be able to Skype with people across the world, the ability to socially interact with people in a different way. Those are definite benefits, but there are also risks, and we need to be aware of those risks. So, as we've talked about the moderation, be aware of the fact that the first week of May, the entire week, first week of May 1st through the 7th, is screen-free week, and you can go to screenfree.org.
On your electronic device or screen.
So go to a screen to read about screenfree.org and Screen Free Week. And what's interesting is they've also partnered that with it being a reading week. And so I know that you and I are hoping to have a conversation, or I'm planning to have a conversation,
Yep.
and what do we want our Screen Free Week to look at? And how possibly to learn
I think
to
we should
build
go
in
all
some
month.
moderation.
May month.
May month.
No TV, no electronics.
All right, we'll see
Except for work.
We'll see who caves first.
Oh, I know who would cave first.
Who do you think will cave
would definitely
first?
be you.
Oh, I think it'd be our kids.
There's no really good sporting events
Yeah.
on in May either, so no football games.
So it'd make it easier
March
for
Madness is
you.
kind of over. Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't think the Red Wings are going to be in the playoffs, so I think May's pretty safe.
You're pretty safe. So, but we're talking all screens. We're not just talking television. We're talking all screens.
No problem.
So, and the reality of a total screen-free week may be impossible for people who are working, and that's our main communication with emails, with text, and but do take a look at what can you do to make that first week of May a very moderate week of screens, and see what you gain. See what you learn. And I think that wraps up our episode on screen time. Anything you wanted to add?
Nothing really I wanted to add, but just take a serious look at how much screen time yourself, how much it's using. You may even keep a log. I know logs are kind of difficult at times, and we don't want to do it, but you can actually do it on your screen. Just log how much time you're spending. And you may be shocked the hours that you are spending on a screen, or I think a lot of times when we sit down and look at how much time our kids are spending on screens, it can be kind of frightening. And try to strike a good balance.
And I did a PS on the screens as well in regards to the sleep. A lot of information out there about making sure you turn off all your screens at least 30 minutes before you go to bed, preferably 2 hours, and do something else. Read a book, read a magazine, do something that is not going to cut down on the melatonin, and learn a natural sleep pattern again. We're no longer listening to our natural rhythms.
No,
we're not
we're not.
listening to our body saying, I'm tired, I'm yawning, I want to go to bed now.
Yep.
Because those screens are so enticing.
Oh, they are.
And so I guess that's it, and we thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching.
Us. Hope to see you soon.
The views expressed in this show are for general educational purposes only and do not constitute professional advice on any subject matter, nor do they necessarily reflect the views or opinions of its guests or of Independence Television. If mental health assistance is needed, please seek professional licensed treatment.